This next chapter is one of my favorite chapters in Being in Time. It is chapter 4, Being in the World as Being With and Being Oneself, the They. So Heidegger will introduce us to the phenomenon of das Man, the They, in this chapter. And for this chapter, I like to have the visual emblem for it that I have in mind is a painting by the Impressionist painter Ebert, his 1877 painting of Paris Street Rainy Day, where you see in the painting a couple walking toward you. You are the person on the sidewalk. You're actually the person looking at the painting on the sidewalk, and then the couple is passing you. They have an umbrella, and they're a happy-looking couple. I have it here up on my other computer. They're a well-to-do, affluent, I should say, not happy, a well-to-do, affluent-looking couple, and they're walking along, and they're deliberately looking the other way to make sure that they don't make eye contact with you. That sums up Heidegger's world of inauthenticity, the world of the they, of passing one another by as the mode of the average everydayness of Dasein in its inauthenticity, its fallenness, its averageness, its everydayness that Heidegger talks about in this chapter. So look that painting up if you don't know it. It's perfect for this. So what he wants to analyze is the phenomenon of being with, what he calls the Mitwelt, the with world. If I look around in my workshop, let's say the workshop that we were talking about last time, in which we find all of these objects that have the mode of being of ready-to-handness about them, and I look at these things, and I look at this pair of shoes, say, that I've just made. I'm a shoemaker, let's say, and I look at them, I realize that they've been made for someone. The dress, if I'm a garment maker, has been also made for someone. If I'm out taking a walk, I see that I'm walking along the periphery of someone's farm who has kept it up very well. Everywhere I look, I encounter others. And so it is not the case that I'm just a lone, isolated ego who appears in the world, as in traditional metaphysical philosophy, the Cartesian cogito, the Kantian transcendental unity about perception, Husserl's transcendental ego. It's just this lonely ego floating around like a bubble to which the world happens to be added as a secondary thought, a secondary epiphenomenon, and others might be added along with it. That's not the case at all. What I find is that when I realize that I'm in a world, I am in a Mitwelt. I'm in a world with others. So being in Sein is also Mitsein. It is also to be in the world being with. Being in is also being with. Dasein is always being with one another, and this is not a secondary thing. It's not a later thing. It's fundamental to the structure of Dasein. It's right there from the start. I am in a world with other Daseins who are co-Daseins, who have co-originated with me in a Mitwelt, in a social world. So it is not the case that I'm an isolated ego existing in a worldless manner, serving the topology of the earth, as it were, like Descartes does. That's not the case at all. I'm in a world with others. Now, with respect to this, these others, the proper mode of, as we've seen, the mode of being of nature is Vorhandenheit, or presence at hand. That is to say, of theoretical nature, just pure things that are there, that happen to be there. They're in the mode of presence at hand, of Vorhandenheit. And the mode of human culture and equipment is in the mode of ready-to-handness. It's there to be used by human beings. But other Daseins are not in those modes. They're also being in the world in the mode of existence, and they are also driven by concerns and anxieties and care and so forth, just as I am. So I'm in the same world along with these others. Now it is possible that, well, the primary mode, recall that, of relationship to the ready-to-handness of tools and equipment and so forth is concern. That is what drives my relationship to these objects that I use in my life tasks, in my involvements in the world, and in my assignments and references. I use these tools. Care and concern drives me. In the human world, the equivalent of this in the Dasein world would be solicitude, as Heidegger says. And solicitude is simply concern for others, and it can take a positive or a negative sense. A negative sense might be exactly as in the Ebert painting that I'm talking about, where you're walking down the street and you're completely indifferent to everyone else around you. So in the modern world, and Heidegger's philosophy here, I think very much is a response to the rise of this new world at the turn of the century, 1900, You know, we hit 1 billion people for the first time population-wise in 1800, and by 1900 we were already approaching 2 billion people here, and the big phenomenon of the world cosmopolis is coming into being in places like Berlin and Paris after Haussmann. And this is the world where Daseins are everywhere. And if I'm walking down the street, as in Caillebott's painting, a negative mode of solicitude might be indifference to these others. I pass them by and I don't pay any attention to them. But notice then that in that respect, that those others are in the mode of the same kind of inconspicuousness that my tool was in when it was working properly. When I was using my hammer and it wasn't broken, it was inconspicuous. It only announced itself and became conspicuous to me when it broke and shifted into the mode of Vorhandenheit. Then it became a problem. But notice too that then people who are not, properly speaking, ontologically speaking, we should say, Daseins are not in the mode of Vorhandenheit or in the mode of Zuhandenheit, but yet, insofar as they are inconspicuous and blend into the background, they do begin to take on Zuhanden-like properties. So in other words, what Heidegger is going to say, and what he's working on in this chapter, is the idea that the modern world, and especially the technologized modern world, the rise of these big cities, is beginning to efface the ontological differences between Dasein, Vorhandenheit, and Zuhandenheit, the basic modes of being that are proper to the 3 different worlds of nature, human technology, and the human modes proper, are beginning to blur now. They're beginning to become, they're beginning to shift and blend and blur, and pretty soon the others around me will become the they, das Man. They'll become anonymous others, basically no different from something that is merely present at hand or in the mode of Vorhandenheit. Technology effaces the distinction between things and Daseins, between entities in the abstract sense and Daseins. It begins to blur them together. So Heidegger does not have much faith in either technology or the modern world, and he's reacting to that with his philosophy here. So he begins to move then into his discussion of the they. So in the second half of this chapter, we have the idea of everyday being oneself and the they. So the they, das Man, or as it's translated in the history of the concept of time, the anyone. So whether it's the they or the anyone doesn't matter. There's a phenomenon which Heidegger calls distantiation or distantiality, in which one's own Dasein becomes subjected to and comes under submission to the they. And it does so in a way that is usually entirely unconscious. Most people aren't even aware of this. One thinks what everyone else thinks. Harry Potter's out, so everyone rushes off to buy the same book, even though the book is trash. It's total garbage and is absolutely worthless, but yet everyone runs out to buy it because that's what one does. One does what everyone else does. One thinks what others think. What others think. One is shocked by what everyone else is shocked by. That's the they, and they are almost a kind of collective self, a collective intelligence almost, although Heidegger doesn't put it this way, that determines the way things will be and the way things are. And the individual Dasein can exist in a state of fallenness and average everydayness and fall under the submission of the they and not even realize it. And so this gets into the issue, and I think it's the key issue in this book, of authenticity versus inauthenticity. The they self is inauthentic, whereas one's authentic self is something totally different. And Heidegger's theory of the subject here is basically that one becomes a subject, even though note that he has gotten rid of, or is trying to get rid of, the traditional metaphysical philosophical distinction between the subject as an I thing, reified, beholding a world of object things or other person things. He's trying to get rid of that by embedding the subject back into the life world, into the factual, actual, real, concrete world of factical everyday life, as he puts it. So he's trying to do that because that model, that epistemological model of, whether you find it in Descartes or Kant, of a realm of subjects, beholding realm of objects, is the Vorhandenheit, the mode of presence at hand of self-subsistent entities that is proper to the scientific way of regarding the world. And he's trying to shift out of that mode. But at the same time, he wants to preserve the subject because it's essential that the subject is there so that the subject can build and find an authentic life in contradistinction to the inauthenticity of das Man, the they, the crowd. So notice too that the they is the direct descendant of Nietzsche's herd animal in Heidegger, and will become an Adorno, the culture industry, the world of mass consumer society in which everyone does what everyone else does, everyone imitates everyone else. But these get into very, very interesting and important life issues here about finding one's authentic self. For Heidegger, Heidegger's theory of the subject has to do with the idea that one becomes a subject, properly speaking, insofar as one differentiates oneself from the they, insofar as one separates oneself from the averageness, the fallenness, the distantiality of the they, the crowd. You don't go along with the crowd. This isn't a book about becoming a mediocrity. That's not what being in time is about. One does not just join the crowd. In Heidegger, you become an authentic self by separating yourself from the crowd and distinguishing yourself in some way. Now, he doesn't specify the way that you do that. That would be the existential ontico way, that you find what it is that you want to do and become an authentic self. He doesn't tell you how to go about doing that, but it is key. It is the essence of what he's talking about, is becoming an authentic self in contradistinction to the way of the village. You have the village, and in the way of the village, if you make decisions in your life in favor of the village, you simply take the job that pays the most money. You marry somebody who is very physically attractive, whether you like them or not, and then you go out and you buy your status symbols, your cars and your houses, and you get social approval, social rewards, money, sex, etc. All this comes your way, but you're living an authentic life. You have failed to distinguish yourself as an authentic self, as a real, true, three-dimensional individual subject. You've completely failed in going along with the crowd and doing what everyone else does out of the fear of the disapprobation that they will direct at you if you go the way of the forest. If you decide, as Joseph Campbell put it, to go into the forest where there aren't any paths, at points where it's darkest, and you go your own way into that forest, the prices paid are going to be enormous. You're going to be, at least for a long time, in a state of impoverishment. You may decide concretely, this might play itself out in something like deciding to be a poet or a painter or an artist, going the road less traveled, as M. Scott Peck puts it, taking up a career or a vocation that meets with social disapproval, and it's uncomfortable. You go to parties with your relatives and they cast funny glances at you and ask you why you don't have a job, and so forth and so on. That's the path less traveled, but it is the only way to become an authentic self. It's the way of fear to go the way of the village, but you have to let go of all of that in order to undertake the way of the path and become a truly authentic self. So you have to decide whether you're going to take jobs in your life just because they gain you social approval, or whether you're going to take them because it's really what you want to do. And if you don't go this way, if you don't become an authentic self, Heidegger doesn't say this, but the implications are that if you don't do this, you will wind up halfway through your life wondering, you'll be living a hollow life, and you'll be wondering why you didn't become that poet, why you didn't become that painter. Were you just afraid of living a life of poverty, or social disapproval, or not keeping up with the Joneses, or what have you? So society, the they, we call it society nowadays, but the crowd, the they, exerts enormous pressures on individuals to conform, because that's where they give you the rewards. But if you make your life decisions and follow your decisions because you think that's what others expect you to do, and they will reward you and say, good, you're coming along with us, then you will end up living an inauthentic life, and you will end up constructing a hell for yourself in which you have suppressed all your real impulses, and they will cause you all kinds of psychological problems as time goes by in the phenomenon of neuroses, phobias, anxieties, panic attacks, and possibly later on even, who knows, psychoses. So they will cause you all kinds of problems if you repress the true authentic self within you and do not follow the authentic path. What is it that you want to be? Become what it is that you are and go the way of the forest. Forget about the path of the village and its social rewards, and you will become an authentic self, and you will be one of Nietzsche's great culture creators. You will shape and make culture. Let the rest of the herd animals graze on the grass how they may. They'll do it anyway, no matter what you tell them or how you talk to them. So that's the chapter on authenticity, and I think it's the key chapter in the book. And in the next chapter, which is much longer, we'll look at being in as such.